All right, here we are live. Amanda, thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited to have this chat with you today. I appreciate your work so much. It's been so helpful to me in this most recent pregnancy, my fifth pregnancy. And I know that your work is so beneficial for all the new moms and the babies. And I am absolutely thrilled to get to pick your brain and hear about the work that you do, how you help people. So everyone that's joining, welcome. This is my friend and colleague, Amanda Conta Steencken, who is Bloom Where You're Planted here on Substack. So definitely make sure to go over to her profile and follow and subscribe to her work. It's really profound, and she is so generous. Amanda, could you share a little bit about yourself and what you do, how you came to where you are? You have such a diverse background, so highly educated, and such an interesting story. So wherever you'd like to share to introduce yourself and help people get to know you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy to be here too, Nico. Thanks so much for being willing to dive into the Substack Live rabbit hole. I'm proud
Yeah.
of you for figuring it out. This is exciting. Um, yeah, so I met you, I learned of you when I was doing my applied quantum biology certification training a couple of years
Hmm.
ago. But I've been in the world of primitive reflexes a little longer. The mainstay of my current health coaching and wellness practice is integrating primitive reflexes, and I'm sure we'll go into that a lot in a little bit. But I came to this because of my own personal health reasons and also health issues that my kids had started working through. And I realized that there was something to this when um, the training that I took for it, the course that I took, because I was so interested in it, dove deep into neuroanatomy, and that's my thing. That's my jam. I actually have a degree in neuroscience. I went to graduate school for that. I did a number of years of research in spinal cord injury and regeneration, and I ended up settling because it was more convenient for my lifestyle as a new mom, as a professor, as an assistant professor at the local medical school. So I taught a lot of neuroanatomy, gross anatomy, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Um,
So academic background, going very high in there, teaching, doing research, all about the brain and nerves, right? Like nervous
yep.
system, yeah, all of that. And that's amazing working with neuroregeneration, because I remember when it was kind of thought like nerves can't regenerate, and now we know that they can. So you were part of that that
Hmm.
transformation in our collective awareness. So that's so
Hmm.
beautiful.
Yep. And I decided about 5 years ago or so, okay, I need to go back to school. I was teaching. It became harder and harder to do because of everything that was happening in the world in general. And I was, because of my own health journey and because of that of my family, I was increasingly more and more interested in alternative ways to support health.
Hmm.
So I went back to school for traditional naturopathy. And around the same time, I discovered the world of primitive reflex integration and quantum biology.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, these three things from different angles came together, and it just felt right. It felt easy. It felt like the right thing to do. I had the support that I needed from family, my husband, my kids. And so it's been a really, really beautiful journey. I'm where I need to be, and I'm just loving every step of the way. It's not easy. It's not perfect. I'm learning all the time, but it's so cool because after applying the tools that I've learned to myself, from herbal medicine to the primitive reflex integration to circadian rhythms, adjusting my circadian rhythms, applied quantum biology, learning about true hydration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I started sharing it with friends and family, and they're like, okay, you got to do something with this. And so that's how my coaching business was born.
Hmm.
And now
Yeah.
I've been working with clients for a couple of years, and it's just a thing of beauty to see their aha moments happen. And
Yeah.
it's not instantaneous and it's not easy, but it's
Hmm.
beautiful.
Yeah, well, you say that, but when I had that session with you, it was some of the most rapid healing that I had experienced. And I had been through, practitioner after practitioner trying to get help with the physical pain that I was in. being pregnant, having all of that extra weight, the recurring sports injury coming up. And so working with you and doing some of those exercises, it felt so fast that I was having relief, even after talking with other people who had told me that because of the stage of pregnancy you're in, the best we can do is not get it worse, but we don't expect to
Mm,
have any like progress. So that wasn't okay with me. And it also, I know, is not your belief
no.
either. So, yeah, primitive reflex integration. I didn't really understand the idea of it when I first like encountered it, but I was so excited to connect with you because trying to parse it from the outside felt really difficult to me, especially being someone who's a reader. So, one of my friends, a longtime friend, who works in early childhood education had come to me because she, thinks of me as someone who might know about such things. And she said, I have a student who um, has primitive reflex activation or something like
Mhm,
that. She was like, and like, do you know anything about what we can do to support this child and, bring some order into their lives because it can be very disruptive when a child is still going through those things at an age beyond where they should be. So I had thought of it as something that was like an early childhood thing. And talking with you was the first time that I had heard of it as something that anyone at any stage of life could
mhm,
go through.
mhm.
So, yeah, for I think just like to give like a high level overview, what's like what's the theory behind it and like how does it help someone?
Yeah, so primitive reflexes are reflexive movements that every human being begins to display during development in utero as early as 5 weeks post conception, all the way through the first up to 24 months postnatal. And the reflexes, the term reflex implies that there's an outside stimulus that causes the system, the developing fetus, the infant, the newborn infant, to respond to that stimulus. And so it's a reflexive response to sound, to light, to gravity, to vibrations, to anything and everything, that comes to the nervous system. And because it's a reflex, it's involuntary. You don't think about it. It's not happening at the level of the conscious brain. It's happening at the level of the brainstem. And these reflexive movements, I call them our superpower because this ability that we have that's programmed into us to respond to the environment is what keeps us safe. What allows us to make the right decisions, movement wise and so forth, in response to specific things that come. And they are designed to eventually kind of disappear, go quietly into the night. But they are essential for establishing the nervous system circuitry that we need in order for other more advanced um, long term reflexes to settle in, like our ability to sit, our ability to stand, our ability to alternate right and left coordination. So, walking eventually, right? And all of these postural lifelong reflexes that get established play key roles in the kid, in the 5, 6, 7-year-old school age kid, when it comes time to sit down and pay attention or focus or learn,
Mhm,
right? Higher order
mhm,
processing. This whole setup plays key roles in the teenager brain, late teens, early 20s, with that young adult being able to make the right decisions. Okay, I'm not going to drink and drive.
mhm.
I'm not going to do drugs, or I'm going to make this choice because it benefits me. This idea of executive function, it all goes back to what happened those 9 months in utero and first 2 years postnatal, and whether those primitive reflexes developed, did what they needed to do, and disappeared, or whether they didn't disappear, or perhaps they did disappear, but something happened later on in life that caused them to reactivate.
Oh,
So,
okay. So
trauma,
it's mhm. That
yeah,
reminds me so much of circadian health because our circadian
mhm,
architecture is also develops in the womb and then matures in the first 2 to 3 years of life, and then that pattern, whatever happens there, tends to keep rolling across the lifespan unless a significant intervention is done. But of course, even someone who started out healthy could then move into a circadian pattern of staying up all night, going on to night shift or different things that can then upset the rhythm thereafter unless it is also reset. So I love that idea that when things like have been knocked off of track, that you can come back to a place where
Reset them.
where everything's happening. Yeah. So kind
Yeah.
of like a reset. Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of like tickling, is that some like is that reflexive movement? Because some people are more ticklish than others. And
So that's an indication of active primitive reflexes.
yeah, because yeah, we always joke about how sometimes like children is, my husband and I have had 5 children together, so um, there's a certain stage of development where it's like they wanna be tickled a lot,
Mm.
and then they grow out of it, and then it's like they're kinda like, "Oh, that don't bother me anymore," but there's
Mhm.
a stage where they're like, "Yay, tickle me so much, like, tickle me before bed for, like, 20 minutes," and it's hilarious the whole time, right? Which you wouldn't like an 8-year-old kid usually is out
It
of that
doesn't.
stage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so again, you see that initially they're desiring that input, so they're
Exactly.
going after it.
Mhm.
You probably know this better than I do, but thinking about inputs, right, and the response, the reflexive response, a newborn who's nursing. And
Mhm.
I remember the lactation consultant when my kids were born would come in and would stimulate their cheek, right?
Okay. Mhm.
And sometimes they would put a thumb or something in the little palm of their hand.
Yeah.
And some of these individuals knew what they were doing. Maybe they could explain the theory, maybe not, but it didn't matter. They knew that it worked. And
Okay.
with with the whole idea of primitive reflexes and what's going on, I learned that a couple hand reflexes, the suck and the rooting reflex, and a couple foot reflexes all develop at the same time when baby is nursing.
Oh,
And
okay.
so to stimulate the palm gets you the baby to suck, or to stimulate the foot gets the baby.
Interesting.
And those three reflexes in particular are developing at the same time when baby is nursing. So what happens when you have a baby that doesn't nurse, right?
Mm.
When you have
Mhm.
a baby that is bottle fed and doesn't get the opportunity to massage mom's breast while he or she is nursing. And I don't know if you notice your babies when they're nursing, not only are they opening and closing their hands around some body part of yours, but their feet are opening, splaying their toes, and then, plantar flexing. And that's all that circuitry that's connecting and getting established so that later the baby can crawl and sit and stand up and walk. It's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Okay. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, yeah, that relates to one of the things I had been hoping to talk with you today about, which is yeah, like what are the kinds of things or signs when that what doesn't happen? So I know sometimes like, babies when they're born, if they have like a hypoxia event or something,
Yep.
sometimes that can make it more difficult. They're thought to have like some kind of brain, damage through the lack of oxygen. And then end up having more difficulty with nursing or with like movement, like sometimes they need assistance with breathing after something like that. So that's like a disturbance in it. And then depending on how severe that is, sometimes it's very transient and sometimes it lasts for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that happens with babies who, end up being born C-section also. It doesn't necessarily have to be this traumatic lack of oxygen thing. Even a C-section baby is deprived of key reflexes that actually depend on the passage of the baby through the birth canal in order to
Oh,
develop or
okay.
to, get activated so that then they can do what they need to do during those first few months postnatal. And
Right.
so there's a couple of reflexes, for example, the spinal galant reflex, the STNR reflex, which depend on that particular moment. And so C-section babies characteristically end up having an active reflex way past when they should.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yep, and examples of that would be, a bedwetter who
Mm.
doesn't get that sphincter control around the time that they should. But it also applies to adults with overactive bladder syndrome or other types of pelvic issues. If they've experienced a traumatic event, it could be an injury, a surgery, toxin exposure, what have you, emotional trauma of whatever sort and variety.
Mm.
could manifest as active reflexes that become active later in life also. So that's the beauty of this work, and that's why I was so attracted to it. It's great from birth to death.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we can help people on, elderly people who don't have much movement going on, but we can, do some of these movements for them and ease pain, ease
Mhm.
discomfort, help them as they're little by little winding down. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So one of the things that's kind of surprised me about this as I've been learning from you is when I had first encountered this idea, I thought it was something that was a lot more like that it would be very obvious. Like obviously I can touch my cheek and not like go to my mouth, right? But there might like what are other ways that they would manifest like other signs of these reflexes being activated
Yeah.
that are more, not like you have to grab something because it touches your hand, but that reflex could still be like needing reintegration, right?
Yep. So, for example, kiddos who are labeled with sensory processing disorder.
Yeah.
So, for example, there's the kid who cannot tolerate tags on their
Mm.
t-shirts.
Uh-huh.
Kids who cannot stay still, the kids with ants in their pants, the kids that are labeled ADHD,
Mhm.
kids who can't lean back because leaning back is going to stimulate that at spinal go on. Anybody with
Oh.
scoliosis, with types of deviations of the spine of the vertebral column, active primitive reflexes,
Oh.
rotated pelvis. So that was one of my reflexes is one leg longer than the other.
Oh.
You know,
I know
more
so
often
many
than
people who complain of that.
yeah, 90% of the leg longer than the other has nothing to do with the actual femur or tibia being longer on one side than the other. It has to do with the rotated pelvis of that
Whoa.
individual. And
Okay.
primitive reflexes that are controlling the entire back body and the front body also are responsible for why it is that, say, I, at some point in my life, I don't know when it was, my body decided it needed to rotate my pelvis in order to find whatever balance within the asymmetry.
Right.
Kids with TMJ issues, chewing issues, kids who talk a lot, that's active primitive reflexes, like the verbal diarrhea concept. You
Oh.
know, it's a
Mhm.
stimulus. They need to stimulate the face, the mouth. Um,
So it's kind of like the craving tickling
Craving
that we were
tickling.
talking about
Yeah,
earlier. Yeah.
yeah,
That
yeah,
like the craving, like constant motion in the mouth.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
And so think about it. What's happening from a neural point, from a neural view, from a neurology standpoint? The system is looking for dopamine
Mm.
and to
Okay.
level dopamine and serotonin, and
Mhm.
it does that with movement, which is a
Right.
beautiful thing. And so the
Mhm.
ADHD individual is essentially self-medicating by virtue of moving. And so
Mhm.
what do we go and do is we block that and we completely mess up, our inborn, our innate ability to regulate that.
Mhm.
And so in the world of primitive reflex integration, we also understand Parkinson's disease and other types of movement disorders, disorder of movement, Huntington's, to be directly related to neurotransmitter deficiencies. And so,
Mhm.
what's happening in an individual who tremors, even essential tremor type stuff,
Mhm.
that's not related to Parkinson's. What that system is doing with the tremoring is it's trying to make more dopamine, trying to balance out dopamine and serotonin because
Oh.
the environment, because their lifestyle, because whatever existence they're going through, toxin exposure, what have you, is not allowing the nervous system to make it in proper levels.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I also am thinking about a lot of the research that I've done into like childbirth and how when looking for, supporting physiological childbirth, we often are looking to the mainstream conversation is all about the hormones, the hormones, the hormones, but there is actually a bunch of neurotransmitter activation that also has to do with how labor progresses. And so when women have and then we also talk about like traumas getting re-triggered, like the safety response being so important, and how much that also relates to like whether we're in an activated state with like tons of glutamine flowing, or if we're in like a relaxed state with the GABA flowing. And like
Mhm.
that flip from the glutamate dominant to GABA dominant is really important in labor that hardly anyone talks about. But now I'm thinking about how the experience that women have is often that memories come up that they're not really able to progress in their labor until they process those memories,
Mm.
which is like a nervous system issue,
Yep.
right? So,
Yep.
um, I had shared with you that I was actually using the primitive reflex integration movements that you taught me when I was ready for labor with this little guy to come through, and I had been kind of putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, the like diving into the labor and accepting and saying, "Okay, this is it. I'm ready to bring my baby down." And so when I finally was ready for that, I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna do these movements." And absolutely, as soon as I did that, I was, it changed the rotation of my pelvis down there, and I felt the flood, and then suddenly the surges were coming on much stronger, and moving from, like, the kind of gentle place that they had been into the more intense storm of labor.
That is so cool. Yep. And imagine, traditionally, so I was one of those moms who gave birth in the traditional hospital setting on the bed.
Mhm,
Labor number 1 was epidural because it was
mm,
back labor. I didn't know any better. Nobody told me about, there's ways to rotate the baby, stuff like that. You'd
yep,
think I would know, right? Because of my background, but I didn't.
mhm,
And so bottom line is the birthing supine is
right,
so destructive, really, to the
mhm,
natural process that we were designed for, that we have the infrastructure for.
mhm,
And when you're on the bed, on your back with the legs up, there's no moving, there's no rhythmicity to it, there's no nothing. You're just kind of stuck. There's no ability for the coccyx to move back because the bed is there in the way.
right,
And so that's
mhm.
so cool.
Yeah, and it flows right into postpartum too, because so many
Yes.
women, like, it's the most common time for a woman in her entire lifespan, like, right after having a baby is the most common time to get a mental health diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I think of, like, talking about how these traumatic events can potentially, re-trigger the primitive reflexes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like, doing that, laboring on the back, without sensation, right? The epidural have like blocking the sensation, so you're not even feeling what your body is doing. And then how you feel about that, how you were treated, all of the different things that happen in labor, and then afterwards you're alone, in bed, sore, and if you don't get the movement right back,
Yeah.
then it can lead down the line to continued, like, just life being more difficult after that
Yeah.
beyond what it should be, just because, like having a baby shouldn't be an inherently traumatic, it should be an intuitive inflow process.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. No, there's a lot. I think a lot of us women in this time in history are doing a whole lot of beautiful cycle breaking and healing from,
Mhm.
it's almost like post traumatic stress disorder. Like,
Yeah, I get
um,
women coming to me often saying that they have PTSD from something that happened in relation to their their childbearing
the
years,
birth
whether
experience.
it's yeah, exactly, oftentimes birth experience, sometimes what happened
Mhm.
before or after, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. No, I'm excited because more and more people are becoming aware, are remembering. I feel like we're remembering how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so that's my mission is, okay, how can we support people in the remembering of the fact that they have everything they need?
Mhm.
Moms, new moms, pregnant moms have everything they need. It's not meant to be so complicated and so difficult. And yet, at the same time, we are very fortunate to live in the 21st century and not in the 17th. So that should complications arise, we've learned enough that we can get in there quick. But
Yeah,
there's so many things that could be avoided.
human
So
knowledge is
many things.
compounding. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about having a new baby and like how can we help them through having their reflexes emerging at the times they should be, and then and like you said, like they close down. They what did you say, fade into the night?
Yeah. So basically, breastfeeding is key if
Mhm.
and whenever possible. Um, there's ways to adapt the setting if for whatever reason that can't happen. It's very important to ensure connection between baby and mom, between baby and dad. That baby needs all the touch available, all the fourth trimester, right? Those 3 months after birth, holding the baby, not leaving them alone to fend for themselves.
Mhm.
If there's one thing I would do differently if I were to do this all over again, is to let my baby sleep with me as long as needed, and really try to suss out the whole breastfeeding thing, because that didn't work out for me that great. I tried,
Oh. Mhm.
but we never breastfed exclusively. It was always supplemented with formula. So many things that I would do differently,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, for example, a wonderful example of a primitive reflex that develops in utero and is active at the time of birth and stays active for the first 3, 4 months postnatal is the Moro reflex or the
Mhm.
startle reflex. So I
Right.
remember this. You're changing your baby's diaper, and all of a sudden they do this.
Yeah.
Beautiful reflex that tells you that nervous system is perfectly on track where it needs to be. Around
Mhm.
4 months, it needs to go away.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
the foundation for our autonomic nervous system,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I had wondered about that
Uh,
because someone was once talking about how when they were a kid, they would they were, like, terrified, like, if their parents were sleeping, they're like, "We do not wake up our parents because our" they would wake up and they made that exact motion, they're like, "If I woke my parents up and they did that motion, then they would be it would, be chaos for the whole house."
mhm.
That
Interesting.
startle thing, like, they don't not waking just,
Yeah,
like, feeling safe, like, as you get older and more competent and, like, able to deal with the world, it shouldn't feel like a small startle is going to,
completely
potentially be
discombobulate everything.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously, allowing baby to move on the floor, on the bed, on the
Mhm.
grass, that whole tummy time idea,
Mhm.
any kind of opportunity, even on the back, right? Because of the movement, and they're seeing and they're learning how to track with their vision. Movement of the eyeballs is intimately connected to primitive reflex circuits.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so kids
Mhm.
who have dyslexia, kids who have issues with math, kids who have, emotional outbursts, it could very well be that it has nothing to do with some emotional situations so much as that's how they're responding to the fact that their eyes aren't tracking properly. They
Oh,
can't,
okay.
follow
Mhm.
things on the page, for example.
Mhm.
The kid that has primitive reflexes active, that is the kid who writes on the page, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. They should be able to write on a straight line, but they dive up or they dive down.
Oh.
That's active primitive reflexes. There's tracking coordination issues that are not happening.
Mhm.
Kiddos with myopia, a lot of vision issues can be corrected with this work.
Yeah, that's so fascinating and makes me think back to the time when I got glasses in 5th grade, and it was, like, just such a stressful time, and I remember one of the big frustrations I had at that time was being, I'm left-handed, and nowadays the scissors are ambidextrous, but when I was in school, they had this huge slant that made it so I couldn't use the scissors, so I couldn't cut in a straight line, and it always made me feel it was, like, one of the things in school that made me feel so frustrated, and I think that was also kind of similarly around the time when I started having trouble reading the blackboard and feeling like if I was in the back of the classroom, I felt out of control.
Mhm.
I needed to be, like, closer to everything, so
Yeah.
that, like, totally fits with that being a very, very stressful time of starting to, like, kids getting moved into different classes of, like, "Oh, these kids are advanced and these kids are behind," and, like, all of
Yeah, you
that
were getting
social stuff.
bombarded from all sides. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep.
And that's another thing. So vision doesn't completely finish developing until, well into the first decade of life.
Yeah.
So to
Mhm.
force reading routines on kids that are 5, 6, 7 years old is
Mm.
antithetical to proper development.
Oh,
And so a
right.
lot of the times those reading issues, those vision issues get compounded because of the stresses of not feeling adequate, of being
Mhm.
told, oh, well, you got to go to remedial reading because it's not happening, but you're only 7. I mean, it's a very frustrating thing. That's one of the many reasons we decided to homeschool was we're
Mhm.
not I knew in my gut, and this was even before I started with primitive reflex work, I knew in my gut that uh, the fact that we're pushing our kids earlier and earlier to do things just to not feel right,
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah, and I love as we've gotten to know each other better, being able to compare notes on the homeschooling because your children are a little bit, ahead of mine in that journey, and so it's, always so nice to have community and know people that are, making similar decisions, in parenting, in community. So, yeah, I
Mhm.
really appreciate that and also, agree so much that, also from the circadian rhythm standpoint that I'm always focusing on so much for people is like getting the kids up in the morning and going to school and being indoor under those lights all day. And they just keep cutting recess and playtime. And my sister works in early childhood education, and she has been having a beast of time trying to introduce outdoor free play inside of the system that she's in, because they have been taught that they kind of need to hover and that they need to be pushing verbal development. These are, 2, 3, 4 year old kids, like preschool.
Wow.
And they're
Yeah.
like following around and like trying, and they've been told that they have to narrate what the kids do. And my sister's like, it helps with keeping the kids clean more than anything, but I don't think it actually helps the kids have a better time here.
No.
And that if you just kind of back off and let them actually do their own thing, it's often, very very different than when there's a teacher hovering saying, "Oh, you're picking the cup up now." Like, every single you know what I mean?
Fascinating. So I got
Yeah.
out of the system before that started happening. In fact, some dear friends of mine and I started an outdoor business, a
Oh,
business for outdoor time for kids, so that
mhm,
our kids could be a part of it. And we worked through New York State regulations and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I learned during those 3 years was, well, I was able to just confirm my gut that the kids know. We would come in with lesson plans into the forest, which is the most oxymoronic thing ever. And the lesson plans just got wet in our back pocket because
yeah.
watching the kids follow each other's lead for building forts, for balancing on logs, for jumping in puddles and getting wet through and through and experiencing all the sensations, that's what helps our nervous system develop
Mhm,
all the different sensory inputs, not just auditory from an adult speaking something or
mhm,
visual from somebody demonstrating something on a sheet of paper or on a blackboard. In
mhm,
fact, I would argue that for early childhood development to happen fully and properly and efficiently, you need all the other inputs too, the
mhm,
touch, the hot cold temperature differences, the
mhm,
feeling hungry versus, cooking something over the fire and getting the olfactory input and the taste bud input, plus the proprioceptive stuff, right? So balancing on uneven ground, walking barefoot on the ground.
mhm,
All those things contribute to helping those reflexes develop properly.
mhm.
And
Right,
then on
yeah.
top of that, you have your eye development too. So,
Mhm. I'm thinking of the feet now, and one of the things that I've seen in children who are sometimes having sensory process issues are the tiptoes,
mhm,
where they just
yep,
are, like, constantly on tiptoes, and it's very uncomfortable for them to put their heels down, so I've seen they even make, like, little, like, poppers that make a clicking noise you can glue to their shoes so that
yep,
they, like, get excited to stomp their heel down
yep,
and hear that sound, but I'm sure that there are other ways that that could be addressed through the nervous
yep.
system. 'Cause it's often not a conscious thing that the child is doing, they may not even be aware of it, and even it becomes so habitual that even if you call them out and be like, "Hey, can you walk on your
They
heels?"
can't.
They
Yeah,
can't. Yeah.
yeah. No, it's a primitive reflex. Active, I
Mhm.
forget which one it is, but it
Yeah.
involves, the back chain of muscles plus,
Mhm.
balance with front back ability to coordinate, and doing a lot of these little rhythmic movements that are part of the tool that I use are
Mhm.
amazing for helping the kid reintegrate the reflexes necessary so that they can now do a full gait proper from heel to toe with
Mhm.
every single cycle of stepping.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. So, is there, like, a primitive reflex training program? Like, would someone go through, like, learning all of the movements, or do you do targeted movements based on how they're experiencing the world, or how does working with a practitioner, because I've seen, like, some YouTube videos and stuff, but it's never very clear to me, like, is there a beginning and end point? Do you just jump in the middle? Like, what
They
what
yeah,
is
those
this
YouTube
world?
videos leave a lot to be desired. So,
Yeah.
two ways to, two different ways to answer that question. From a client standpoint, wanting to address an issue, whatever the issue is.
Mhm.
As a practitioner, I bring in primitive reflex integration using rhythmic movement training as one of the many tools to work with that client, right? And I often start with that because it just addresses the whole nervous system. And sometimes just having them doing these rocking movements on the floor shifts some things in their mind so that they are now more willing to incorporate the circadian rhythm changes, the proper hydration things, and whatever else may be needed for their
Mhm.
particular situation. And in terms of what movements I start with or whatever, what reflexes I start with, it depends on the person.
Mhm.
If it's kids, often just active movements, or so I get the parent to do these for them. If we're doing virtual sessions, and it cannot last more than 30 seconds. You lose them quick. The younger the kid, the shorter the time rocking it is. It's
Mhm.
sustainable because there's not much time spent, but
Mhm.
little by little. And oftentimes I end up saying, I'm going to work with you, mom, first,
Okay.
because at the end of the day, we're so connected to our kids that if we don't do the work with a kid is going to be very limited
Oh,
in
interesting.
its progress.
Yeah. So, yeah, I remember, you're mentioning rocking, and I know that that's a soothing thing that sometimes people do
Mhm.
in mental health. I remember my grandpa actually telling me that my grandma was crazy. He's like, because if she would get emotional, she would just sit on the floor and rock, and I couldn't talk to
Yep.
her, and I couldn't help her, and I would just have to leave because she would just be sitting there rocking. That is soothing the nervous system, right?
Self-soothing slash going into freeze or flight because there's nothing else that she knows to do right now, right?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and so then that's what there's a lot of people training this work all over the country, all over the world. A lot of them are occupational therapists, physical therapists, a couple chiropractors. They weave it in with other things that they do in therapy, right? Which is kind of
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah.
Um, there are a bunch of teachers. The Waldorf world completely jumped both feet into the primitive reflex integration world, which is kind of cool. And so they're
Mhm.
bringing it in with all their outdoor stuff, nature-based stuff too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then there's people like me where this is the foundational tool in my practice, but I've had such beautiful results personally and with other people with the quantum and circadian pieces that they form this tripod
Mhm.
of, three pronged approach to supporting people wherever they are.
Yeah.
The bulk of my work is actually with adults dealing with chronic pain,
Mhm.
and so
Right.
that's been a powerful thing to witness. But then if you're a practitioner or a teacher or a social worker in the school system or in some kind of an institution, and you want to learn this, BRMT USA does a bunch of training courses for practitioners, which are kind of cool too.
Mhm. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful because I think this is just such a potent modality for being so like, breaking with the body at such a fundamental, like, deep, deep level, going back to where we began, as
Hmm.
humans. So it really just makes so much sense, and also, like, just because of having experienced it and, like, that really, really fast feeling of reconnection and, getting out of freeze states, 'cause,
Hmm.
that's kind of what I was told, like, what had happened to me was that I'd had an injury that then my body had locked and said, "Well, don't move this until it heals," but then after it was healed, it forgot to unlock that spot, and
Hmm.
then that had kind of gone on so long that all of my muscles and ligaments and everything was, like, kind of, like, just locked into that freeze, so when I did those motions and my body felt that it was actually safe to, like, move that part of my hip that was just so tight,
Hmm.
and it didn't actually hurt, but I didn't have a way of, like, accessing it, like, I'd move consciously moved my hip every different direction, and that hadn't helped, and I had a physical
Yeah.
therapist helping me move my hip in every single direction, and it somewhat helped, but not really,
Hmm.
but then when I got into the rocking, and it was just, like, a kind of relaxing, and it reminded me of one of the things that I learned as a labor doula, which they call "shake the apples." Have you heard of this?
Hmm.
But basically, it's grabbing you get behind the woman, she's having contractions, and you're getting her hips, and you jiggle like this until you find the rhythm that her muscles are moving separately from her bones. So they call it
Oh, how
shake the apples,
cool.
and it's getting, like, all of the fascia and everything to,
Yeah.
release because women get so afraid of the intensity of contractions that they
They
further and
block up.
double down on that and make it, um, more painful for themselves because they don't know how to relax because it feels so scary, and it feels like if you relax, you're gonna explode or fall apart or something, so the shake the apples is a way, that felt very similar when I did the movement on my back.
Yeah.
Um, it
Smoothing in
felt
the
kind
back.
of like doing shake the apples on myself, which, like, you can't really really
Yeah,
do.
it's
Mhm.
the less you think about it, the better.
Mhm.
And so one of the reasons I love this work is because a lot of us that are doing what we do are very cerebral, right? We're in our frontal lobe. We're
Right.
always trying to figure out what's going on. What's the mechanism of action? What's the pathway? Right? And
Yep.
so in doing this work, I've been able to more and more get out of my cortex
Mhm.
and let the primitive, brain stem run the show, which ultimately it does, whether I want
Right.
it or not, right? 90% of our nervous system is preconscious or subconscious. Like Bruce
Mhm.
Lipton has said, only 10% is conscious. So
Mhm.
this unconscious, preconscious part is what we really truly need to be supporting. And the only way to support it is by feeling,
Right.
right? By remembering how to truly interact with all the different inputs that come
Mhm.
to us. The five traditional senses, proprioception, plus, here's the most powerful sensory organ of all. I have concluded, I don't know if people would agree with me or not, is the mitochondrion.
Mm. Okay.
The
Mm.
mitochondria collects all this information that a lot of our other sensory organs don't, but this information is foundational for energy storage, for energy production, for all kinds of other cellular processes. And so to support mitochondria in ways that you and I now know because of the other work that we do, circadian and
Mhm.
quantum stuff, is powerful for supporting the nervous system. You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
neurons, the brain is the second largest reservoir of mitochondria, right? Per cell. Ovaries
Mhm.
are number one, and then heart
Yep.
and brain are up there too.
Mhm.
Why? What's the reason? And so I've been
Yeah.
loving diving into that. What's the input for mitochondria and how do we support that for a proper output?
Mhm. Yeah, it's super fascinating, especially when women are having fertility issues. A lot of times it goes to, like, they'll be diagnosed with, like, low hormones or something, but then they won't be told, like, that mitochondria are what are making those hormones, and
Yep,
mitochondria are also involved with, like, the feelings of safety and things, and so if we're not feeling, safe in our bodies, then our body isn't going to prioritize those particular hormones,
right.
and so, like, doing this foundational work to is so important. And yeah, the collagen that they're sitting in too is another thing that I
Uh-huh.
think is overlooked, because nerves are all embedded in the collagen matrix. So if the collagen isn't healthy and is breaking down from stress, which is kind of what, like, cortisol can kind of, break down and inhibit the healing and growth of collagen, and then the nerves are, like, exposed and they're not able to function properly without that matrix there. So I can see how, like you said, that you're able to get clients to be in a more receptive mental state through this work, and that just makes complete sense to me,
Hmm.
that if they can start to feel safe, then they can start to explore things that would before have been triggering a feeling of fear
Yep, would
because it's
scare them.
unfamiliar. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Mhm.
Well, and then in addition to what the whole aspect that you just laid out, at risk of falling back into my left analytical brain mode for a second.
Yeah.
From the moment I started diving into this work, I kept asking my mentor, okay, but how is it working? What's the mechanism of action? And once I learned about fourth phase water,
Mhm.
I came up with this theory, and I don't know if I'm the only one or not, but I'm excited for the day when we can actually figure out how to show this, right?
Mhm.
But my theory is that one of the ways these rhythmic movements are working to bring ease into the system and to help the different primitive reflex circuits rejigger themselves into a proper state
Mhm.
is that rhythmic movement is generating piezoelectricity
Right.
that is charging up the water shells, the water networks that surround every single biological surface in our body. And that includes nerves, that includes the
Mhm.
axons of the nerves that we're
Yep.
stimulating.
Mhm.
And so when you beef up that force of water, you increase, energy potential, you support mitochondrial production of metabolic water, it all
Mhm.
goes to that. And then when you start thinking about water as I think of it as a server farm storing, a memory bank, storing all
Right.
kinds of information.
Mhm.
This work, I don't know if its founder, Harold Blomberg, a Swedish psychiatrist, realized this at the time or not. He's since passed, but I could totally see how, and I've seen it time and again, how this work, without meaning to, stumbles into the world of trauma and
Yes.
resolution and healing from traumatic events. It doesn't matter whether it's big T or little t trauma. All these things that we experience get stored and the body remembers, and sometimes they become blocks and hinder proper
Mhm.
healing, proper recovery, proper development. And
Mhm.
so this is a beautiful, easy to implement, sustainable tool to work with that.
Mhm. Yeah. So is it possible for people to like how long does it take to learn how to do the movement properly, like, to be able to get going? Like, do you see
It
a big
depends.
difference in the yeah.
It depends
Yeah.
on the person. I showed
Mhm.
you the movements and you got them pretty quick.
Yeah.
I would wager it's because you've done all kinds of other personal work. And so
Mhm.
your body is already more able to listen. In some instances, I have to do the movements for them when we work in person, what we call passive movements.
Ah.
And it'll be once a week. And that's all that their nervous system will handle.
Mhm.
Sometimes when we do passive movements, they leave and they sleep for the rest of the afternoon. They're so exhausted. You've never known that such a simple little thing is going to be so taxing to the nervous system. And sometimes it'll be weeks of passive before I realize, okay, what if I introduce the active version of this movement? Can they do it?
Mhm.
And so it depends on the situation.
Right.
Kids
Okay.
will go quicker than adults.
Mhm.
With newborns, especially newborns who've had birth difficulties, say, oxygen deprivation, the C-section babies who are stuck in the birth canal for too long, whatever, you can do the passives, a little bit every day, gently, maybe while you're changing their diaper, and before you know it, they start recovering quicker than their counterparts who are now not receiving the therapy.
Mm.
Um, Kids that are in school that are having learning issues, developmental issues in school, reading, behavioral issues, if they start working with a therapist who is able to introduce these, without them realizing, those kiddos have a better outcome. And
Mhm.
it could be on the order of months. And in a few months of doing this, they catch up to whatever level they're supposed to be according to these arbitrary standards the school system sets.
Mhm.
Um, but then they're better. They're happy campers. Everybody's at ease, and so on and so forth. With adults, it depends. I've been at this for about 5 years, and I am, light years better than I was. I was my biggest thing that I was working through was diagnosis of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis when I was 15.
Oh,
That
wow.
affected my wrists.
Mhm.
But eventually, that affected my entire lifestyle and way I went through my days because of the pain. And so chronic pain kind of was a thing with me up until the last 5 years or so when I started doing this work. And I managed it with drugs, prescription drugs over the counter, what have you. I became really good at surviving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, things happened and here I am faced with this new content, this new information that I realized, where's this been all my life, right? Primitive reflex integration, proper hydration. I realized I was chronically dehydrated for one.
Mhm. Mhm.
Circadian health was trash. And
Mhm.
so my first experience with primitive reflex integration, so with the rhythmic movements, was I started doing these with a PT who was now my mentor because I threw my back out.
Oh.
And I would do that periodically. So something in my lower back would, you know, get caught. And I
Yeah.
would walk crooked for several days, and it was very painful. And as a mom of young kids, you can't really afford to be in bed. And anyway,
Mhm.
so I started doing this. I'd had issues with sciatica before, and my first experience with these movements was not a complete disappearance of the pain, but when had been doing these movements and I realized that sciatica was starting to set in again. And I was like, no, 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 I can't do this. I
Mhm.
got on the floor, I started rocking, and I realized that I wasn't afraid of the pain.
Yeah.
I will never forget that moment. And
Mhm.
as I look back, I realize that the last several years have been an unraveling of, oh my goodness, going through life for decades, being afraid and tensing up and going into freeze to protect
Mhm.
yourself, like you were describing with your hips, right?
Yeah.
So that was huge. And
Mhm.
that's usually what I see with a lot of adults who go into this work. The pain doesn't resolve immediately,
Mhm.
but their relationship to it changes. Their mindset, their
Yep.
viewpoint, their conversation that they're having with themselves changes. The words that they're saying about their bodies
Yeah.
become kinder, more
Mhm.
supportive, right? They're
Yeah.
not angry anymore. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, the pain is gone. They can get off pain meds. Um, they can recover quicker from physical activity. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's on and so forth.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely that the fear, like, I didn't realize that I had fear, but I really have felt like my body was, like, failing me
Yep.
because I'm so healthy in so many ways, but then become pregnant, and, pregnancy is very taxing not only in the physical changes that happen, but also, like, the metabolic changes that happen, and so I think a lot of women that are kind of, like, on the verge of having like dehydration problems or things when then they get that extra, need in their body and then it can really, become challenging, especially if they, go down morning sickness and like when that extends super long, like the dehydration just kind of compounds and then the physical pain. Something I've been hearing more and more lately is there's hypermobility. Have you been hearing, do you
Hmm.
know about that?
Yep.
It's something that yeah, a lot of women are talking about lately and how that is contributing to their pain and contributing to their difficulty in pregnancy and birth. And they want to have more children, but because of like this diagnosis that they have, in some cases, self diagnosis, in some cases, like an official diagnosis. Um, and so, like, do you know of any connections there or?
Absolutely. Well, so when you have active primitive reflexes, your system is either hyper or hypotonic,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so the hypertonia directs correlates directly with that hypermobility. And in the newborn world, people are calling it the floppy baby syndrome.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And so apparently one of my mentors, Kate Wagner, she's the main instructor in the BRT USA uh, chapter of the company, and she does a lot of the instructor training
Mm-hmm.
for this work. When she was in South Korea doing instructor training for a lot of the teachers and providers there, she was saying they were coming to her with, what do we do? Because the floppy baby syndrome and this, that, and the other. And she realized, oh my gosh, it's active primitive reflexes exacerbated by non-native EMFs.
Mm. Okay.
Huge, huge direct correlation. And that speaks to my theory of how this is working through body water.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you
Right.
realize that non-native EMFs are causing all kinds of, calcium production or calcium, intracellular versus extracellular calcium imbalances and so on and so forth, you realize that the ability of our body to make and maintain fourth phase water is completely being destroyed.
Mm.
And when you can't do that, you can't have a nervous system that develops properly. And so it will go one way or the other. And when you have hypertonia in one part of the body, inevitably there's going to be tightness or lack of tonicity in the other. Right?
Oh, right. I guess that makes sense, yeah. So, like, compensating or how to make the body
Yeah.
work even if something's
Yeah.
not online, yeah. We're amazingly resilient, us
It's
humans.
incredible how we adapt. But
Yeah.
yeah, at a cost.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Oh my goodness, I can't believe how fast this hour has flown by
Has it
chatting
really
with
been an
you.
hour?
It's very nearly been an hour. Yeah,
Oh my goodness. That's
we've got about 5 minutes left. So, yeah, we've had gone so far and you've answered so many of the questions. I'm really grateful for that because I had been really wanting to ask you about the last one that we got to, the hypertonia, because that's one of the areas like I'm like, I can tell that everyone can see that this is a collagen issue, but no one's talking about ways to support collagen.
right.
So this, and then my other question was like, with babies, is it possible to help them through the movements, which you confirmed that
Hmm.
yes, you can.
Hmm.
So you called that passive,
Hmm.
right?
Passive movements.
Passive,
Yep.
you're moving the baby. What you can also do with older people too, if
Yep.
you know what
It's
to do.
great for people, yeah, older people who can't move. So
Mm-hmm.
stroke patients, people who have other movement disorders, they have
Mm-hmm.
trouble. Um, mhm,
Mm-hmm.
the elderly.
Yeah, right. And then the connection to the nervous system and trauma of both big T and little t variety. Because, yeah, it can be like car or bicycle accidents. It can be emotional things. Like there are all kinds of things that trigger the body to go into a freeze response. And
Mhm.
then so those things can re-trigger primitive reflexes. And
Yep.
then this work then allows them to, again, fade into the night
Yep.
um, so that you can move in a more mature adult
Yep.
pattern, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And basically, what ends up happening is some people come to me and we work through something specific and then they're
Mhm,
done. But more often than not, especially with adults, when you start this work, you start peeling away the layers of the onion.
mhm,
But it's a beautiful thing because when you do it in a respectful way, honoring your body, it doesn't have to be traumatic.
mhm,
And you can do it little by little. And each time a new layer is peeled away, you have more resilience to deal with the deeper, probably harder next step, next level in the healing
mhm.
journey. So
Yeah.
it's very, very, very beautiful. Can be done gently, and it honors the
Mhm.
person.
Yeah. Wonderful. Can you share how people can connect with you? Um,
Absolutely, yeah. So I have a Substack blog called Bloom Where You're Planted,
mm,
and a lot of the information leading to my website is there. But my website is orayoswellness.com. Orayos is a great word that means the perfect time or the beautiful time.
that's lovely.
And it's been a word that's been with me since my teens.
Mhm.
And so even though people said, oh, that's hard to remember, people are not going to remember, I figured, you know what? No, they can remember. They'll remember this. And if not, they can book me and we'll do primitive reflex integration and then they'll remember. Um,
Beautiful.
orayoswellness.com is
Mhm.
my website where I have all the information for, doing some one-on-one coaching with me. And yeah, does that
Mhm.
help?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah. Your website, yeah, is great. That's where I booked my session with you, which I was so grateful for. And look forward to doing more work with you. I'd love to connect and learn some of those movements for babies, just since that's so much in my zone. And
Mhm.
I do occasionally get those consults from the mamas whose babies are struggling with breastfeeding and um, or struggling with like getting their motion going after birth trauma. So that will be so useful. And then for moms like putting themselves back together after traumatic birth
Absolutely.
or
Yep.
preparing for labor too, when there's the body needs to be able to move intuitively, um, to make it safely through the birth portal.
That
Yes.
would be the ideal time because
Yeah.
then mom is at risk of using a cliche word, more regulated.
Mhm.
We've
Yep.
bastardized that word now, but the bottom line is you can bring ease into mom.
Mhm.
Then, the moment of labor and delivery isn't as daunting. And
Mhm.
I could totally see this tool supporting people who work with new moms for physiological birth
Mhm.
situations.
Yeah, yeah, I'm wondering about those, passive movements for moms who
Hmm.
do, elect to have epidural, but
Oh,
then,
that's a
because
great idea.
I've had someone reach out to me and they're like, "I'm in the hospital right now and I'm in labor and I have an epidural and things aren't progressing. What can I do?"
Yeah,
Like, I don't know if I can help you right now if you would have talked to me before this. But this is an
no.
idea of, and especially not being hands-on, but, in the time when I was a doula, And that could have been a really powerful
That would be
thing to
cool,
know
but the
about.
first movement that comes to mind is the one that I showed you, the sliding on the back.
Yep.
They are in that position already.
Mhm.
So if you could show the dad or the doula that they do have or somebody in
Yeah.
person how to do it,
Mhm.
that might be a cool way to.
Yeah, likewise, the side lying, because they always put moms
Mm,
with the epidural side lying with a peanut ball between their knees.
mm,
That's another one that could be really
yep.
perfectly augmented with that motion to get the energy into their collagen, into their mitochondria there.
Well,
Yeah.
and that sideline one is gonna help with a spinal galant reflex of the baby, so any passage through the birth canal, if there's
Mhm.
stagnation there, I would imagine I don't have direct experience with it, but just
Right.
from a
Yeah.
theoretical standpoint, that would make sense.
Exactly, yeah, and then I love that too, that, like, for the baby to be, regulated for best effect, mom and baby would both be doing these treatments. That's
Yeah.
also a lovely little takeaway piece. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate it, and I love, learning from you and look forward to seeing you around. Everyone, definitely make sure to sign up for Amanda's Substack, and if you feel the call, connect with her for a discovery call. She's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Amanda. You're a gem.
Oh, Nico, thank you for this opportunity. It's great. Any chance I get to share this work, I treasure, so I really appreciate your
It
time too.
is, yeah, I know, I wish that you could connect with everyone in good time. In
It'll
good time,
happen.
you will.
The
Mhm.
next time you book with me, I'll show you how to do these with the baby on top. I'm
Okay.
excited to see that.
Yay, perfect, lovely, looking forward to it. Alright, take care.
You too.